Welcome to the ConfigureITDone Podcast. The ConfigureITDone Podcast is a place where successful thought leaders in the SAP space come to share their leadership styles, their tips, and their unique stories on how to run successful large-scale SAP programs. Listen to the podcast to learn from their successes, their failures, their career stories, and their inspirations.
This podcast is in partnership with the Black Dog Institute, who aim to create a mentally healthier world for everyone. If you wish to support the cause, please donate via the link below.
Welcome to episode 6 of the podcast. It's great to have Stephen Wells. He's worked for us on a couple of occasions now. Was it three occasions?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So Stephen's a very senior SAP project manager. I'm delighted to have him on. Thank you for your time, Steve. I'd love to ask a bit about your background, first of all, and how you got into SAP and how you got to this point.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. And you're right, yes, we've got quite a history, probably stretching back 15 years or so, I think. I got into SAP way back in the mid-90s, working for Hewlett-Packard. I was leading their intercompany global financial design, which was a really good opportunity to get involved. That was in the old R3 days. But it was quite a big period of acquisition for what was originally Digital Equipment Corporation, became Compaq Computers, became HP. So from like a systems delivery standpoint, there was so much to do when with all that acquisition. So the intercompany process, that included a lot of transfer pricing, where a lot of big corporations were looking to relocate their manufacturing base. I feel really bad about that now, knowing what we know about tax minimisation by corporates. But in those days, it was obviously a pretty essential element of the corporate strategy. But from an experience point of view, very useful. So I was there about 10 years, then moved into contracting for near on about 14 years, and pretty much managed programs and projects of varying sizes. I think most people listening to this podcast have probably done contracting in some shape or form, and my experience is it opens doors. You obviously have to live by your delivery, and you're as good as your last contract, but it's a great exposure to leading big programs if you get that opportunity. Unfortunately, it doesn't really allow you to invest in where the technology is going. And if you do invest, it's either an expensive exercise or you have to take time out from work. So, I managed to balance the two, but a couple of years ago, after doing a lot of contracting with SAP, the opportunity came up to join them full time. And
I was really surprised when you done that, a career contractor, and then you went permanent.
Yeah, it seemed like a really good time with SAP. They go through interesting stages of expanding their project management team, but then they downsize, based on directives from region or global. Yeah. But I think there's a momentum now, certainly around aligning services with sales, that we're getting a lot of increase in work. And anyway, they've been able to get headcount increases. So I joined about 2 years ago. It's been really, really interesting because it's not just around life cycle project delivery now. It's upgrades, it's consulting, it's QA and governance, audits. So your engagement with customers is on many different levels. So it's been really interesting and beneficial. And where we're at now with the building tidal wave, if you like, of moves to S4, that's still a few years away, but there's still a lot of ECC customer base that are still to really build a business case for that move. We're seeing a lot of a different way of implementing, and that is, looking at proof of concepts, for example. So a lot of customers want to do it in a more risk-managed way, without the big investment of time and cost and resources to take take the plunge
Sure.
straight away. So working with customers to tailor either a transformation or an upgrade, or a consulting, or a custom development. They're probably the four key, work streams that are really hot at the moment around ANZ.
Sure. Steve, I've been having a lot of questions from clients in the market that are looking to make that jump to S4, and it's mainly around appetite. Are you seeing a lot of appetite from some of these ECC customers moving to S4 or not at the moment?
There's an appetite for the end date of ECC, and they're beginning to panic about what an out-of-maintenance engagement looks like.
Yeah.
So a couple of very big customers have decided to split the technical upgrade from the functional upgrade. Obviously, they have a pipeline of delivery, which very much is centred around business benefit and business funded, business driven. But they know this S4 journey is coming up, so it's quite feasible now to split the technical upgrade from the functional upgrade. That is upgrading the HANA database, running a technical upgrade to the current release, which is 2020, which was released in October. And then if they're doing that in a POC, they can maybe activate some of the functionality that they would get with 2020 in that sandbox, so that they can run business improvement showcases and demonstrations to the business to decide what it is they want the most and what should be prioritised, so that following the technical delivery they can then run through that expanded functional, because it's a huge undertaking to engage both your technical platform and all of your business units on changes to functionality. Quite often a lot of those customers have a lot of customising, which is typical.
Yep.
And one of their needs is to move back to standard processes.
Yeah.
Well, a POC in a sandpit environment that is fully activated gives them that opportunity to compare, what does that migration to standard actually mean and what's the business impact. So I think a lot of customers are going to split technical and functional.
Okay, that's a good insight for any CIO out there looking to implement. But Steve, define what a successful SAP program is for you, and how has your view evolved or changed over time?
Okay, so I guess every life cycle delivery has its challenges and its unique characteristics, but what is current in my thinking is it comes back to two key areas around stakeholders and around the team that you're able to pull together. I think the trend now, in terms of certainly moving towards a hybrid agile delivery, is blended teams. So it's not just resources from maybe within your organisation, or if you're brought in client side to manage a program, you're probably faced with resources from multiple vendors, which has its unique challenges in that a lot of those resources may have other work that they're also working on. In other words, the luxury of having a full-time resource is pretty rare unless it's in a core area of scope. But being able to manage commercially in particular, I think the big risk area is around multiple vendor resources to be able to manage their or scope and plan their work and manage their velocity. I found it to be an extra challenge. I mean, it all pretty much is necessary in terms of sourcing talented resources from wherever they may lie, but the project manager always lumped with having to administer and manage that within budget and schedule. So big challenge there and a big risk. I think another big area of risk from a delivery standpoint is ensuring you've got the right mandate from the customer or the client. So, quite often you're forced to start a project without a formal business case approval. You might have funding, but in terms of stakeholder approval or stakeholder buy-in for the business case, which is typically driven around tangible benefits to underpin the funding that's required. But quite often there's a lot of benefit that isn't necessarily tied to dollars around standardisation, around simplification. Certainly working with government agencies, their priority is not around saving headcount and saving money, which is counterintuitive for the rest of us that want to ensure what we're implementing leads to savings over time. But quite often the budget cycle for governments are literally tied to, well, if you're putting forward a business case to save money, we'll take that money away from you, even before the project's done because of that short budget cycle. So I think framing the justification for projects needs to be more around standardisation, utilising new technology, and certainly the move towards business technology platform, or what we remember as cloud platform, SAP cloud platform. It's just been rebadged. There are so many more benefits there around distributed reporting, analytics, mobile access for whatever transaction that managers do. So being able to have input to a business case that isn't just based on dollars, I think is very important. And then thirdly, I think the point I'd make on successful programs is around stakeholders, being able to properly identify and engage the various levels of stakeholders, because they will all be different, and guarantee that on average they will not be supporters of the program for one reason or another. So you need to be flexible in how you engage with them and ensure commitments you do make to them that address their core needs are able to be met.
Sure.
It's too easy to be eager to please, and it puts the onus on not delivering to those commitments. So generally, some of those early stages of identifying and understanding stakeholder needs and being able to categorise them so you can effectively communicate with them and engage, certainly through design and early stages, is really important to build that trust, build that honesty. You've got to break down what it is they want into manageable items that you can deliver on.
Sure. Yeah, we've had a lot of feedback from clients that we placed, and that's one of your strengths, that stakeholder engagement. But how would you adapt, Steve, to the different stakeholders?
Well, I think listening. If you've got the luxury of coming in at the early stages of a program, and that is post business case, and you're moving through prep and getting ready maybe for detailed design, whether that be through workshops or what. But what you'd want to do is have one-on-one meetings, try and build a rapport, talk about what you're planning to do in the short term to ensure we've got the right people from that stakeholders organisation engaged. Because that's another big challenge. Quite often, good people, that is people that can impart knowledge on how things are done now, but have a vision to how things should be, and have the tolerance and patience to work in a system implementation or a software development lifecycle, is very rare. And quite often, those people, can't be backfilled, or backfilling them is really hard. So, if you can determine who that is you're bringing in, and that stakeholder, try and look at what can be done to backfill them so you're maximising their engagement, is really important, certainly in detailed design. If you're able to use a methodology which is more flexible, more hybrid, agile, that is, what scope you've got to do, and you're able to break it down into smaller components, and maybe provide some flexibility on how much time you need from that resource to manage, your sprint delivery, as opposed to a full waterfall delivery. That's obviously a benefit, but you've got to be able to build trust up front, but give them confidence that what that engagement with them is going to be is clear. Sure, there's going to be issues, but they would want to know about those as early as possible, and just ensure you've got the forum for their input and for them to be able to provide that feedback. Invariably, you're going to have conflict and decisions needed. So generally, some of your management planning that you do up front has a decision maker, which is your product owner or your sponsor, to resolve those, and that's understood by that stakeholder group. But that a lot of that is suck and see through the early stages of that design and engagement.
Sure. Okay. So coming back to your looking at your team within a project, what are your top 3 imperatives you look for within your team when you are delivering your project?
Well, obviously talented people, but I don't think individual talent is enough. I mean, what I look for is, I think the strength of a high performance team is not just in talent alone. It's the confidence of those resources to seek out answers when they haven't got them themselves from a network that they may already have within the organisation, or they're raising it to me, or at an architect level where they don't know. I think this is one of the challenges of remote teaming, which we're all faced with now, is ensuring that those resources have that confidence to speak up when they're stuck, and they're not going to burn time running around in circles or trying to dream up the answers themselves that ultimately becomes unstuck.
It's almost having that ability to ask for help if they don't know the
answer.
Yeah?
Exactly.
That can be challenging. That can be challenging sometimes.
It is, and you've got to find a way to make them feel comfortable and confident to speak up. I mean, knowing about issues early is one of the secrets of managing risk and delivering a successful project. Not hearing about it through at the back end or when you're in a test cycle.
And how do you encourage that, Steve? Do you have regular catch-ups with the team, or how do you encourage that from the team?
Well, a couple of points. One would be delegating as much autonomy to those resources, either groups of resources or individual, which is a characteristic of an agile team in that authority is passed to managing their scope of work. I mean, you have a scope of work, but the order in which that scope is delivered is determined by the team. But yeah, it similar in a way to stakeholder management. You obviously need to try and know the background of the resource you've got, trying to validate not just what their CV reads, but speaking to people that have worked on projects with them in the past to just understand the unwritten rules that they've been able to pick up, because unwritten rules is I think is fundamental to every team, that you're expecting team members to pick up. It's all part of that collaboration with each other, that being able to work as a team is generally where most resources, that they're in the right place. They want to work.
Sure.
They want to work effectively, and I think building that rapport through clear communication and frequent communication initially, and clear direction is really really important.
What other imperatives do you look for within your team?
Probably accountability as well. Program manager's never going to be able to mother a whole team in terms of being responsible for every element of providing artifacts, of monitoring that output. I think just the fundamental reference material that they need to consult. Obviously, an up-to-date schedule, knowing what their resource plan is, having a detailed design that hopefully they've had an opportunity to provide input to. It's not just an architect or a integration consultant that's written a tech spec and handed over to a build team. There needs to be collaboration in landing on that design so that that team can work effectively from day one. What I tend to do, and most customers seem to be on board with this, is adopting the agile principle of lean documentation. That is, you do the minimum to agree a high level design.
Yep.
But quite often the artifacts which were typically part of a formal signed-off process up front, such as technical specs, functional specs to a certain degree. But if you've got a decent requirements register, my view is you should be able to respond to every requirement in that register of tying it to a process or a solution area or solution component, and the technical spec will come together in the first half of the build, so that you can have a midpoint design review with the customer, using those documents. But it allows you to get started with build early, without waiting for all of the exhaustive detailed design to be done up front. If you get started early, you can get baseline configuration done. You can show some of that working software early, if possible, through part of your planning.
Excellent. Okay. Now, coming back to your project management methodology, can you define that, Steve?
Well, it very much differs depending on what you're faced with. If it's a waterfall delivery, that methodology is quite tied to particular Q gates through, or quality gates through the phases. But the idea of Q gates, I think, is really, really important, because the formalising of what checks, what is done, covering the whole spectrum of environments, business engagement, solution, data. I mean, there's a lot of different facets that need to come together to make a project successful, and it's very easy to overlook some of the fundamentals in the early stages, certainly of design and build. So generally, the Q gate that you have to move from design into build, really, it's worthwhile to formalise that in terms of an assessment based on agreed criteria. And for that matter, during the planning phase, what is the success criteria that makes the project a success in the eyes of the customer? So working hard on building that success criteria up front, and elements of that is referred to in the Q gates of the various phases. It helps you know that you're on track to meet that criteria in the realisation phase, to get out of realisation and deploy. Sure.
Okay. And what would you describe as your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it, Steve?
Well, yeah, thankfully I haven't experienced any monumental failures that have resulted in litigation. So that's a good baseline. But look, sure, everyone's got things that could have been done better in hindsight. Big failures for me is around scoping. I came into project management through managing particular phases of delivery, so mainly through data migration. I did some test management as well, and running blueprints and fairly major design workshops with customers. Probably out of that, my biggest learning was in data migration. There were a lot of failings. I mean, data migration is tricky because it's depended on as early as possible in the build cycle, so you can go through cycles of trial conversions. So, but to get the entire design of your extract, your translation and your loading, getting that design and building the tools up front is a huge task. Quite often it gets left till late. I let it I let it drift a little bit, and we were caught out and basically had some significant schedule slippage in the program because we were just caught short on being ready for migrating real data. And mock-ups will only ever take you, mock-up data will only take you so far in the early stages of build and early stages of testing. So can't emphasise enough to invest both in time and resources in scoping out your key data migration requirements and ensuring you've got quality data to feed into not only your build but unit testing, so that the code that's getting delivered by the build team, is working software as early as possible. But to get the most out of your integration test cycles, you really need to be working on converted data.
Sure. Okay. So obviously you mentioned earlier you started at Hewlett-Packard, and then you done 15 years of contracting before taking a perm role at SAP. Now you would have worked with multiple people, multiple different leaders, multiple different stakeholders. Who would you say has been a big influence on your career, and what did they teach you?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting one. I'd have to say my father. My father was a senior quantity surveyor where I grew up in Perth. He led one of the biggest construction companies in Perth, then moved out on his own, set up a very successful project management consulting practice. I've always looked up to him as being a really high achiever, and he's come through the hard way. I mean, building and ensuring a big construction company not only survives but grows. When he pretty much was dealing with unions, dealing with very difficult customers. I'm only thankful I don't have to deal with unions as well as difficult customers. But no, he shared a lot of his learnings with me, and he put a lot of time aside when I was young, and he had a massive influence on my perspective and just how to try and get things done. Which at the end of the day, we've all got to find ways to get things done through any number of challenges, and you don't get it done through railroading. You get it done through combining soft skills with tenacity, and I'm still learning. I've got a lot to learn, but what he taught me was really significant in my life.
That's brilliant. Who would you thinking coming back to work, like who would you like to hear on the podcast?
Well, I think there's a lot of big organisations playing in the SAP space now in terms of moving to new technologies. There's so much that is available and can be utilised effectively. We've now got a lot of players from what used to be the Big Four, but now we could probably say is Big Five, with TCS and Wipro in the mix as well. But any of the leaders, the thought leaders, or the delivery execs from consultancies that SAP have strong partnerships with, which is a major emphasis of where we're going. We can't do we don't even pretend to be able to manage the volume of work. So we've got a very robust partner organisation that I've really only embraced to advantage recently. Certainly doing some really good work with TCS and Accenture, and hearing from some of the leaders within those organisations would be great, I think.
So I think you'd be happy. Bruce McKinnon's just agreed to come on the podcast. Obviously, he's working for Accenture at the moment. But we'll certainly approach those other organisations as well. But now, thanks for your time today, Steve. It's a pleasure